Hi and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Travelers Season 2. In this video I will review Season 2 of Travelers as a whole. So I have to give a spoiler warning for Travelers up to the end of Season 2. If you haven't seen all of Season 2, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. However, if you haven't seen Travelers at all yet and would like a spoiler-free review, you can check out my quick review for Travelers Season 1, which I will leave a link to in the description below. So, as for Season 2 of Travelers, I have to say this was a pretty huge disappointment. I was a huge fan of Season 1 of Travelers. It had me on my... It was really unexpected. I tuned in, I thought, oh, this would just be another generic time travel show, but it actually blew me away. Great character stories, really suspense scenes. However, Season 2 was kind of the show I was expecting in the first place. Not a bad show, don't get me wrong, but just another decent time travel show that's kind of generic and doesn't stand out that the way that Season 1 did. Now, don't get me wrong, there are things I really liked about this season, and I'll get into those later, but I think they're kind of outnumbered by what I didn't like of this season. And just more to the point, I just think the season was just kind of average. Like, most of the episodes were just kind of like, were either, okay, that's a fine episode, that's okay, it's average, or like they're really good in some aspects, but there's a lot of like flaws holding it back. There's only 2 episodes which I actually think were great, which is in contrast to Season 1, where there were a lot of episodes I loved, and a lot of things I loved about Season 1. So unfortunately, I will have to say I did feel this was sort of a downgrade from the greatness of Season 1, and I'm not quite sure about the future of the show. I'm not as interested in it as I used to be. So anyway, let me get into this, and I'll split this video into two sections. I'll start with what I didn't like about the season, and then I'll end with what I did like about the season. So let me start with what I didn't like about the season, and that is, well, first of all, the first couple of episodes. There's a really huge inconsistency in writing, which I think was my overall problem with the season, is that in Season 1, you kind of got the feeling that they were making things up as they went, that they didn't have a long-term plan. Some things didn't quite jive with other things, but for the most part, like, I was able to overlook it because the overall season was interesting and good enough. Here in Season 2, I think the problem's exasperated. It's much worse. There's way more inconsistencies and way more issues of, you can tell they're just making stuff as they go along, and it doesn't feel... it feels really disjointed, and it's funny because this is, in most parts of the world, this airs on Netflix all at once, and it's weird to get, and it actually hurts the show, because when you binge watch it, you notice these flaws are a lot more apparent. Like, because this is made in Canada, and in Canada it airs on a weekly basis. So it seems to me the creators are thinking of it in this mindset, but the rest of the world, even the US, it airs all at once, and when you binge it, you notice that, like, so many inconsistencies and different tones and just a mismatch of everything that doesn't feel right. And, like, as I said, this was slightly there in Season 1, but it wasn't, that huge, so it could be overlooked. Here, I think it was a much bigger issue, and it just made it hard for me to really care that much about what would happen in the season. Now, getting into specifics, let me start with the first couple of episodes that I had a huge problem with, because, okay, so at the end of Season 1, they had a storyline where these 2 programmers came from the future, and they said, oh, there's this faction that McLaren and his team never heard about, because apparently they changed the timeline where, these people were supposed to die, didn't die, and they grew up to form this, like, rebel faction or whatever that wants to take down the director and do things themselves. And so the storyline progressed where there was assassins sent to kill these programmers, and McLaren's team were protecting them. But then pretty much all the other Traveler teams turned against McLaren and his team, even to the point where Carly was ordered to kill McLaren. So everyone's pointing. It's like a Reservoir Dog situation. Everyone's pointing guns at each other. The programmer's saying that he built this huge machine, and that the director was going to travel back from the future into this machine, so the director would be in the 21st century. And so, nobody knew who to trust, because you didn't know if it was actually the director that was ordering these other traveler teams to kill McLaren, or was it the faction who had taken over the director, ordering everyone to kill McLaren and his team. And so you didn't know what was whose side to be on and what was what, and that was such a great sort of story beat. But then the FBI came, and I was like, I don't know. I was less impressed with that. So then Season 2 begins, and they completely disregard the storyline that was interesting, and instead focus entirely on this FBI thing, which I was not interested in. So that was a huge disappointment to me. But more than that, there's so many inconsistencies. First of all, the episode ended at the end of Season 1 with them saying, with the programmer guy saying, "Oh, the director's here." So it made me think that the director did come to the 21st century, but in this first couple episodes here, they act like that never had. They was never referenced. It's like they were just pretending. Writers like, oh, people won't remember that. Let's just pretend that never happened. And McLaren starts with saying, "Oh, destroy the machine." What the fuck do you mean destroy the machine? You think the director's in there, but even alright, let's say they don't think the director's in there, and maybe I'm just misremembering or whatever. Still, the people who wanted the machine destroyed were the same people who were trying to kill him. The traveler teams were being ordered to kill McLaren and destroy the machine. So why does McLaren want to destroy the machine if that's what the people who were wanting to kill him wanted to do? It seems to me that he should want the machine to stay intact so he can figure out what's going on. But the thing is that they never reference any of this. They never reference any of the fact that the teams were taking over and people were trying to kill him. They just have one line of dialogue with Carly. It's like, "Oh, remember I was ordered to kill you, haha." They have to reference that, but they don't actually explore it anyway. They don't examine it. They don't say, "Oh, who can we trust?" That was a whole thing. Season 1 ended we can't trust the other traveler teams. They all have been corrupted. Who can we trust? We can't trust anyone. Completely wiped clean. They were pretending like they could trust absolutely everyone. And then the machine, apparently, the director's not in it, and it just takes over all the FBI agents and transforms them into new travelers whom McLaren and his team instantly trust. Now, this does kind of pay off. They do round it back to the faction sort of thing, because you find out later in the season that these are the faction people. But why didn't this possibility occur to McLaren? And throughout the first set of episodes, they barely reference the whole thing about the director being offline. They get messages and they just assume it's the director. And Grace even asks, "Oh, is the director back on?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah." Well, it seems like it was touched on so little where it should have been the main focus. It was kind of just an aside there in the background. Oh, yeah, things are back to normal. And that really pissed me off. It's the entire sort of cliffhanger, which I thought was awesome at the end of season 1. The entire storyline was just wiped aside instead of focused on, oh, the FBI is on to the travelers, which I'm honestly not interested in at all. So, let me get into some other, I had some other issues with these first couple episodes, aside from this main storyline, is what they did with some of the character stories really irritated me too. It seems like it was just getting repetitive. It's like they're out of ideas and they don't know what to do, because then there's the Marcy and David. And I was actually impressed, after Marcy was reset at the end of season 1, I was impressed that their relationship still held, and that Marcy still saw value in David, that she didn't go, "Well, you're useless, I'm going to leave you." And that's what they did here. They did that here. And now, granted, it was more of that she saw the kind of effect that her presence had on him, so she was doing it kind of to protect him too, but she was still being completely, ignorant of the relationship they had. And when he brought it up that they they were intimate before, she was like, she's kind of just very dismissive of it and saying, "Oh, that's not me. I don't really care about that." And then, so we get these dumb storylines about David getting back together with his old girlfriend and acting like she was referenced before, but I'm pretty sure that she wasn't. And that was done. And Marcy working in a hospital and the doctor hitting on her. And oh my God, I hated it. I hated it. I hated it. It was just their relationship was by far the best thing about the show. And for them to, and it's kind of, they have to do the cliche romantic comedy thing where they break up and ooh, are they going to get back, and they drag it out. I just wish that they skipped that part. They don't really need to do that. Anyway, and then speaking of relationships that kind of screwed up, is McLaren and his wife. Now, I was worried they'd go in this direction from the end of season 1, because this really irritates me that they erased her memory from Bishop. Like, I understand, like, in character, in story, why the other Traveler teams did it. It makes perfect sense. She knows about the Travelers. They can't leave that memory intact. But it's so just rewinds and just backtreads their character story to uninteresting, because the whole throughout season 1 she was like, very jealous or suspicious of her husband, and it was just so boring. And then right after they reset her memory, she goes right back to doing that. So this season starts with her thinking he's cheating on her, so she leaves him. And I'm just like, oh my God. I didn't really need to have that there. And the whole thing about, she wanting to sign separation papers and then him being depressed. And it's like, that irritates me, because in the episode Bishop, like McLaren, like the Traveler McLaren, showed how much he actually cared about his wife. He risked his own life to save her. And that was really heartfelt, really touching, and it's so frustrating to go from that to her not remembering any of it and just thinking, oh, you're cheating on me. It's just like, I'm over it, and I didn't like to see that. And then, like, the two of them get back together eventually, but it's kind of yada yada. It's like all of a sudden he's back in her good graces. They didn't really, like, at first she's like, what are you doing here? We're separated. I don't like you, blah blah. And then all of a sudden, like, I know that he found out she was pregnant, but even after he found out she was pregnant, she was still kind of keep pushing him away and keeping him at a distance. And all of a sudden, with no explanation, like, blink if you miss it, they're back together and they're perfectly in love again. What? I mean, it could have been handled a hell of a lot better than this. It's just like, and speaking of, again, more character stories that piss me off, is the whole thing with Jeff. Why the hell is he still here? Now, Jeff is Carly's husband. At the end of season 1, when he was getting arrested for shooting the girl, I'm like, thank God they're going to get rid of this character. But then, like, during the break, I start to realize, I'm not going to be that lucky. They're going to bring him back. I can't stand this character. I think he's a bad guy or like someone I love to hate. No, I just want him gone. He's boring. He's not interesting. He's just frustrating and annoying. Don't want him here. The whole storyline with him and Carly, like, trying to pretend to be back together, and he's trying to get on her good graces so they could impress the child welfare people or whatever, so they could get their child back. I mean, fuck that. I mean, at least it's different than season 1 storyline of him constantly trying to sabotage her, because I was getting sick of that. But this isn't really any better. I don't know. It seems like they need something for Carly to do when she's off duty, some character story, so they have to have some BS with him. And I'm just really not interested in it. And here's the other thing. Okay, so another thing is Philip meets this chick who's another Traveler, and she gives him these eye drops that will cure his heroin addiction, and then it becomes extremely obvious that he becomes addicted to the eye drops, and he's acting like an eye drop addict, and she even refers to herself as his dealer or his handler or whatever. And what? I mean, that's. I mean, I was done with this guy's heroin addict storyline. As I said, it was getting a bit tiresome in season 1, but to have a cure for heroin that's just as bad as heroin, that doesn't really make any sense. That's really dumb. And then once the storyline's done, you notice he's completely normal, so he is cured. But I just thought that was silly. I could have done without that too. And plus, like, what is the most obvious thing in the world that she was with the faction? I mean, from the very beginning, she's like, oh, well, maybe the director shouldn't do this, and she'd do shit like, pranking that racist guy who ended up killing his family because of that, and she doesn't care. It was so freaking obvious that she wasn't with, sent by the director, that she was with the faction. But anyway. So, we had now these are episodes, like, I want to talk about a bunch of average episodes. These are episodes I didn't necessarily hate, but they were kind of just, I don't know, average. Like, okay, we get the episode with the bombing, the terrorist plot, or whatever, where they're supposed to kill Bishop, the Senator Bishop from season 1. I don't really think we needed to see him again, and I thought the storyline, this whole episode was kind of it kind of didn't need to be there. And the character story with the so-called terrorist who hangs out with Trevor and Philip, that was actually interesting. I did like that aspect of it, and I did kind of think it was a bit heartbreaking the way that she was converted by them, but then the freaking director killed her anyway because they want the bomb to go off. But for the most part, it seemed like an aside that wasn't really, I don't know, it didn't seem fully fleshed out to me. And then we got the time loop episode, and at first I was like, wow, this is I love time loop episodes. This is going to be great. It wasn't. It was one of the most bland time loops episodes I've ever seen. I've seen there's been a lot recently. There's been Star Trek Discovery, there's been Dark Matter, there's been a few others more recent, Stargate SG-1, Next Generation in the past, X-Files. But like, this is almost, it didn't even, like, it was just repetitive. They were just doing the same thing over and over again, and it wasn't, like, with most time loop stories, there's sort of a curve, there's a through theme, there's something where people are learning and they're growing from the experiences. Like with the Discovery one, you had Stamets who remembered everything, and he was like exploring the relationship between Burnham and her character stories, and how they're slowly learning to defeat Mudd and stuff like that. Whereas here, it wasn't even McLaren and his team that were experiencing the time loop. They were ignorant of the time loop. It was another traveler sent to the future. And also, did they ever explain, if they did, I missed it, why they were able to do this? Because it's been established in the show that the director, that they can't send travelers back to, the earliest they can send a traveler back is to the latest point that the last traveler left. So here, when they're redoing it, they're sending it back 17 minutes before the last traveler left. Now, maybe there's a loophole where 17 minutes is the maximum that you can send before the last traveler arrived, but I don't remember them saying that ever. I don't know. They had to have some excuse to do this time loop episode. I mean, at first I thought it was kind of fascinating that, to see them trying and learning from this experience, but it just, I don't know, I didn't hate the episode, but I thought it was just really bland, and it didn't do much with the premise. And then there's the whole thing about Grace's trial, and she was on trial, and it was such a boring, stereotypical trial episode where the judges were being unreasonable, but then you find out it was all just this show just so they could flesh out the who was on the faction. It's just like, That's all I have to say about that. And then there's the return of Hall. This is a character I could have done without. I didn't really need to see him again. I mean, it's great seeing Colonel Young from Stargate Universe. I love Stargate Universe, but I didn't ever like this Hall character, and it seemed like they never really explained what they were doing out of prison so soon. They were like, "Oh, he must have been released." It's been like a year, I think, in the story. It's been a year, if I'm correct. And they sort of, he's less of an asshole, and he gets, they get along a bit more. Like him and McLaren bump heads at first, but then they team up to save the president, and that's the other one, the one of protecting the future president. I mean, the storyline was fine. It was really intense in the moment, seeing all the faction things fight. But why? I mean, I don't know. It just seems weird that all of a sudden they want to kill this future president. I mean, when they never really tried to do shit like this before. I don't know. Like, it was okay, I guess. It just didn't seem necessary, I suppose. So yeah, let me get into the whole inconsistency with the director and the factions, because this is something that also really bothered me. It's what they were saying in, I think episode 6, is that they found out that everything that happened before, with the director had been offline this whole entire time, and all the messages that the messengers they got from the future is actually from the faction. So the faction was controlling the future tech, but they don't have, you need a super intelligent AI in order to send people back. So they weren't able to send people back or whatever, but they were able to send messengers. But then you get these storylines of they would have all these people locked in the conference room, and they would mass send people back, and I don't know, they explained that they were just secretly sending a bunch of people back before the director went offline, but I thought that was after whatever, who cares. But it doesn't make sense to me, or it doesn't follow. It's an inconsistency that what they're trying to say here is all the messages that they got before this episode came from the faction. And I have to call bullshit on that, because the whole episode with Bishop and their orders, they got direct orders to take out the terrorist thing and to kill this senator guy who would do this environmental shit. Why the fuck would the faction care about any of that? There's no reason for them to care. And there's other sort of messages before that, they had a thing where they're hunting down the Traveler team that Vincent Ingram, and I'll get into Ingram more when I get into what I liked about the season, by the way. But the episode when Vincent Ingram captured all the Traveler teams, and McLaren was out to get him, and then at the end you get a messenger sent to Ingram saying leave McLaren alone. You get a messenger sent to McLaren saying leave Ingram alone. Apparently this came from the faction. Why the fuck? How would the faction even know about Ingram? Why would they care? Why would they do this? It's just, no, it's an inconsistency in writing. I have to call major bullshit on this. Anyhow, let me get into Marcy's backstory, which I'll talk a bit about and what I liked about the season as well. But what I didn't like about this is I find it really far-fetched to think that when she went into the tub and learned about what her host was like, and apparently she wasn't always disabled, that she was actually fine, she was normal, she was an orderly at a hospital, but then Vincent Ingram came along and turned her into an mentally disabled, handicapped person. I mean, there's nothing that's directly, it's not like what I just talked about where it's a direct inconsistency. There's nothing directly saying that's implausible. I just find it, impossible, but I find it implausible. I find it a bit too much serendipity that, this Vincent Ingram character just so happened to, be a major figure in the host that Marcy took. It's too much, and plus I don't need to say that she was actually normal before and now she's disabled and then now she's normal again. I think that worsens her character. I think they should have just left her alone, that she was disabled her whole life. I think having this extra back step, I mean, it was so they could introduce the character of Simon, which I have no issue with Simon, but they could have found a better way to introduce him. I didn't like this. I thought it was dumb. And so now, let me get into this ridiculous ending of the season. And this is probably, again, the season started very poorly, and it's going to end very poorly as well. Now, I was into most of the storyline in the finale at first with the team, with their team's loved ones being captured and Ingram sort of interrogating them. But the way it ended was so fake. I did not buy this ending at all. Like the whole thing of he's releasing the information to the travelers, and the world's gonna know about the travelers, because I just don't buy it. I don't buy that anyone would buy this. They would actually say, oh, there are time travelers. I imagine in real life there was a news story saying, oh, there's time travelers from the future. Who's going to buy that? I mean, maybe with time, if it's like proven, a lot of definitive proof, but that definitive proof does not exist in this episode. So I don't think anyone would be taking this serious. I think the FBI would be treating it as they're terrorists or something, and it's a bunch of insane terrorists, basically. They wouldn't actually believe they're time travelers, and it seemed they were actually believing they were time travelers. And then, like, what was worst was so telegraphed that you had the McLaren's team. They each had a loved one, and that ending where they were each arguing with the other one was so telegraphed and so fake. Oh my god. Okay, so let me get to it individually. First, we had McLaren. Now, this was the only one I actually bought. This because can't I actually buy her believing this, because she knows her husband, and she knows there was an instant change. All of a sudden he's vegan, all of a sudden he's acting differently. So I do buy that she could believe this. And this is a bit frustrating though, because she already knew about the travelers, but she knew it in a sort of a good way from when he saved her freaking life, but that got erased, and now she just has this negative thing. I don't know, the way she would act, like, you killed my husband and slapped him, I don't know about that. I guess maybe, I don't know, it just seemed a bit over the top for me. But the other ones, okay, so so the thing with Carly and Jeff, like, Jeff was like, get away from me. Like, why does she care what he thinks about her? And also, the other thing about that is he freaking, if he believes this traveling thing is true, then he just learned that he killed his wife. That his wife was going to die. If this traveler never came, then he was the murderer. So I don't think he's really in a position to be judging anyone, honestly. And just screw that guy overall. That was okay. And then there's the David and Marcy, and here I'm pissed off again, because I like that they got what they were doing with most of David and Marcy after, like, through the mid-season on. But once they got back together. But now, like, David's like, I don't think we can fix this. That's out of character for him. I don't think he would react that way. I mean, why is he so upset that Marcy was going to die and another person came and took over her body, and that explains it? I think he would be a bit in shock and a bit in awe, but I don't think his reaction would be, I can't be with you anymore, I don't like you anymore. I don't buy that for his character. I think that was really fake, just so they could have this ending where, ooh, guess what? All their loved ones hate them now. It's so telegraphed. And then there's, what? Yeah. Then there's Philip with the lawyer guy. Who fuck cares what the lawyer guy thinks of him? Why is this even a thing? His whole inclusion there seemed really dumb. It's like, why? I guess they were struggling, like, who's Philip close to? What about that lawyer guy? The lawyer guy is like, I don't know, man, I can't trust you anymore. Phil should be like, okay, whatever. Fuck off then. Why does he care? And then there's, like, Grace and Trevor. Has Trevor's sort of loved one counterpart. I don't really buy that Grace was Trevor's counterpart. because he first, when he called this, when everyone's loved ones were being abducted, he called his parents. That would make a lot more sense. That would be more in keeping with the rest of the episode, because they're taking loved ones of the host that the travelers took over, and they're exposing that their loved ones has been taken over by travelers. So that would seem to be more in line, that if they took his parents or one of his parents, they had a lot of bonding scenes with his dad. I don't think we saw his mom at all this season. I think maybe the actress wasn't available this year. So they could have taken his dad, and that would make him a lot more sense, where he'd be genuinely upset that, oh, you're not really my son. That would make sense. To have him take Grace, like, she is a traveler, and at the end, when everyone hates each other, to having Grace she didn't outright say, I hate you, but she's like, oh, I don't know, like, I don't know if I like you anymore. What? The whole ending was really, really contrived, and that's what I really didn't like about the season overall. But okay, so now let me get into what I did like about the season. So first of all, what I loved about the season, this actually happened in the first couple episodes, was Vincent Ingram's backstory. This was a bit of genius. I love how it started out with showing him at 9/11. I mean, that was a great way to start the season, because you didn't know what was going on. And I love the concept of the Traveler 001. Now, as I said, I am still 100% sure that they're just making shit up as they go along. So when they had the season 1 episode when the Traveler team was kidnapped and they had the When Are You From, I don't think they knew precisely who it was that was doing this. So, but I think it does, what they did here actually fit perfectly, and it was actually a very good answer, very good reveal to who it was that kidnapped the Traveler team. And to hear it from his perspective, it actually, what I love about it is that it gives you, he's not an out and out villain, or at least not at first, but I'll get into that later. That it gives you, because it actually, you sympathize with this character a lot, and you can on his side, and you think about it like, do we really want to root for the director? And that's what I liked about the season 1 finale, that they kind of just fumbled, but they bring it up again here, which is what I like. Because these Traveler guys are just blindly following an artificial intelligence. Is that really the right thing? And I love it when they sort of question that. And so here we see this Vincent Ingram guy, where he falls in love and he has a child, but he lives in fear of this director, because the director thinks he should have died. And then whenever someone uses a cell phone, his wife was killed. They killed his wife. They killed his partner. So you can't help but be on this guy's side and think, well, fuck the director. It makes you question that you're rooting for the right team. And I absolutely love that. I think that's brilliant. I think they kind of undercut this later in the season, though, when he starts to come off more as now the villain. And the first couple episodes, he's more of an antagonist. He's opposed. I would say he's more opposed to McLaren and this team rather than the villain. But then I think when we get towards the end of the season, where we get the backstory of Marcy, where you find out he was actually torturing people, and he made Marcy was an old person. He made her disabled, and he was abusing people. That makes him more like a villain. I think that kind of undercuts his character a bit. I mean, not to say that he wasn't always a villain, but what I liked about him is that because towards the end of the season, it's making it like, oh, he's the bad guy, director's good guy. I liked it more when the lines were a bit more blurred than that, where you don't really know who's right and who's wrong. But I think for the most of the season, I thought his character story really worked, and I did really like it at the end. How he actually transferred into Amanda Tapping, so we got another Stargate actor who's going to become a regular, which is cool. Yeah, a lot of Stargate actors, but that's cool about the show. So yeah, that was an interesting twist, though, is that that was his goal, was to escape in a different body. His whole thing about exposing and travelers, as I said, that's a bit dumb. But I did kind of like that there was this rogue element of, the first traveler that the director failed. And as I talked about in my season 1, directors made a shit ton of mistakes. So you do have to question if they're actually on the right side. Now, with the thing with the faction, they're less interesting because they're obviously, I don't know, more asshole-ish than the director. But the Ingram guy, I thought it was a bit, because especially that brilliant backstory where you totally sympathize and you think, fuck the director for killing his wife. So I wish they would have played that a bit more, maybe, and made him a bit more sort of ambiguous, not a total villain. Okay, another thing I loved about the season was the whole Outbreak two-parter. As I said, there were 2 episodes I thought were great, and it had to do with the disease outbreak. Very intense episodes. Like, I thought it was such a great, because usually, there's a story about the outbreak, and we've seen this a billion times before, but it was done so well because you find out it's really the faction instigating this in order to sort of wipe out and this is what sort of solidifies the factions are a bunch of assholes that need to be overtaken. And I thought that was fine because I thought that we used very well. Here is a very intense set of episodes, and this of course ends with them finally getting the director back in line so to definitively say that the director's back. Now, again, as I mentioned before, I didn't believe the thing that it was the faction controlling things before this episode, but putting that aside, these episodes themselves are really intense. It reminded me of what I loved about season 1. Another thing I liked was once Marcy and David did get back together, I liked Marcy's character story towards the middle of the season. Like, her first part I thought was crap, but towards the middle of the season, when she's starting to realize that she lost something in this memory loss, and that, especially when she learned that Grace did it without her permission, and that she didn't really want to do it, so she was thinking, why would I not want to do it? And so it was making her realize that something is up and make her hold resentment towards Grace, which totally makes sense. I totally agree. And I love how she's starting, and she realized, and it was so important to her to remember what her relationship with David is. So even with that, the episode when she put herself in the tub with ice and stuff, and nearly killed herself so she could remember, like, even though I didn't like the reveal that she was, the host Marcy was a normal person who Vincent Ingram made disabled, I still don't like that. But other than that, I really like that she would be willing to go that far to recapture what it was that she felt about David. And so the way the episode ended with her having the memories of David from season 1 and their time together, like, I gotta admit, that brought some tears to my eyes. That was very effective. And I thought it was, and then seeing them back together again after that, and sort of David sort of learning more about her and coming to terms with what's going on with her, that I thought was handled really well. I love that about the season. And another thing is McLaren's partner Forbes from season 1, how he's a traveler now. So we haven't actually seen him since he became an actual traveler. Most of the season he's a faction. I'm sure we will see him again. We actually saw McLaren's boss as an actual traveler more than we actually saw Forbes. But the thing I liked about Forbes is I thought this actor did an amazing job. Like, I know a lot of the actors on the show who play travelers have to play sort of dual people. But I think, like, his transition from FBI partner guy, FBI partner guy to traveler from the future who's actually a faction but undercover, and then actual traveler from the future, was fucking brilliant. I thought he did an amazing job. Like, this is the one thing I think was set up for. As I said, I thought I didn't buy that the faction was in control of the director the whole time. It's inconsistent. But what is consistent is you can tell Like, you go back and rewatch it, you can tell that Forbes was with the faction. I think they did know from the very beginning that the machine, that all the people, FBI guys who got taken over by the machine, were faction. I think they knew this because there were subtle hints in the acting, just the way he was behaving. And of course, sometimes not so subtle, where he would outright challenge the director. I'm like, that guy's faction. But I didn't realize that at the time. But going back and watching it, I'm like, that actually works out very well. So I like that about the season. So overall, yeah, I think this season could have done more. To be perfectly honest, I think it fumbled a lot. I mean, sometimes episodes were just average and weren't really bad, but there's a lot of issues, a lot of inconsistencies. So my rating for Travelers Season 2 as a whole is a 6 good. So still positive, like I said. This was kind of what I was expecting Travelers to be like in the first place. A good sci-fi watch, but nothing great. Something that has a lot of flaws and could be better than what it was, which is a shame because it was an amazing, mind-blowing piece in Season 1, and it's a shame that it dropped to this level. But there's some great elements, like a lot of potential for interesting storylines, like if they actually get back to exploring Marcy's character a bit more, get back into Vincent Ingram a bit more, and his sort of blurring the line between if the director's a good guy or not. I think that's when the show's at its most interesting, so they could possibly get back to that. But where Season 2 ended doesn't really give me a lot of hope for the future of the show, because that was a really bad ending, I have to say. But I don't know, shows have course corrected in the past, and maybe that will happen here. So anyway, that is it for my review of Traveler Season 2. Please be sure to check out my channel as I continue to review many shows, including shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Expanse, Black Mirror, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.